Hello everyone, welcome to the stream. Let me know if you can hear me okay. Thank you to all those that have been patient and waited for us to fix the issues that we were having. Excellent, I'm glad you can hear me. The issues we were having were all audio related, which is a bit of a shame considering that's exactly what we want to talk to you all about today is audio. How's everyone doing today? We all having a good weekend? Thanks to Rookie31st, another random name, and Lombra, who were the first in to the stream at 4 o'clock whilst we solved all these issues. I think we're pretty much there now. So we'll get started. Some of you may have seen, let me just pull up some pictures for you. Over the past few days, we've been fairly busy trying to coordinate audio capture for Deadstick. So we had a pretty exciting day yesterday down at White Waltham. This is something we've been trying to arrange for quite a long time. But every time we've tried to get down there, obviously there's quite a few moving parts in terms of getting Steve, our audio engineer, who's on screen right now, down there trying to get a cub that we can use, trying to get an instructor, trying to find a good window for the weather to work with all of our schedules. Every time we tried to capture audio for the game, we've been defeated by the weather. Finally, yesterday, we managed to get down to the strip and do some recording. So we had a really good fun day. And we thought we'd do something a little bit different today rather than, I was going to say the usual format. We've obviously only done one stream before. We're going to show off some of the footage from yesterday's capture, talk you through what we did in terms of capturing the audio, where we're with that so far, and then we'll show off a little bit of some of the behind-the-scenes gameplay. I know a lot of you are interested in seeing, how we develop things behind the scenes, so I'm going to show you a few of the new features we've been working on very recently, so you can see how that stuff works as well. Okay, so let's jump right into it. I took along some cameras yesterday whilst we were capturing the audio for the game, and this morning I cobbled together a little video just showing off what we did, how we got there, and how the recording went. And whilst I play it, I'll talk over the top. You can see what we went through. It's I'm by no means a cinematographer, so it's very basic footage, but hopefully it'll give you a good insight behind the scenes as to how this all went down. Okay, it's Friday, 10 o'clock, 5th of April, and today's a big day. We're off to capture audio for Deadstick. Plan is to actually fly over there, because what is an hour car journey is a 10-minute flight. As you can see from my windscreen, it's a bit miserable outside. The cloud base is actually reasonably high, it's 2,500 feet, and it's just a light drizzle from a stratus layer, so we'll get down to the strip and then check the weather again, but we're hoping we can get over there, and we're just hoping that the wind stays low enough that we can get up in the cub, and we can capture some audio. Too quiet for you guys? Right, stand by. Let's try and fix it. Let's try that again. Audio, it's ironic that we're talking about audio today, and I think audio is going to plague me throughout this stream, but we'll do our best. We'll get there. Okay, it's Friday, 10 o'clock, 5th of April, and today's a big day. We're off to capture audio for Deadstick. Plan is to fly. Yay! Because what is an hour car journey is a 10-minute flight. As you can see from my windscreen, it's a bit miserable outside. The cloud base is actually reasonably high, it's 2,500 feet, and it's just a light drizzle from a stratus layer, so we'll get down to the strip and then check the weather again, but we're hoping we can get over there, and we're just hoping that the wind stays low enough that we can get up in the cub, and we can capture some audio. Well, as you can see, thankfully we got down to the strip, checked the weather, and the weather was good enough to fly. So I flew Steve, our audio engineer, over to White Waltham so that we could capture some audio. He's never been in a light aircraft before, and so he was thrown in at the deep end for 3 flights yesterday. Once we landed over to White Waltham, we were on a pretty tight schedule, so we met up with James, who was the instructor there, for a briefing to discuss how we would record the audio safely. So the plan then is to do the RPM ranges, so we'll take off full power, then we'll go for level off 2,500 RPM, capture that, and then we'll go for the decreasing 200 RPM intervals. Okay. So you happy with how to communicate that between yourselves? Whether you just want to... There's an intercom in the aeroplane, so just tap me on the shoulder when you finished audio. I'll just say, okay, we're setting the RPM up now. Yep. And then just tell me when to stop, and I'll carry on to the next one. Perfect. Yeah. So we'll go down from 2,500 RPM down to 700 RPM, or whatever your idle RPM is. Probably around about that, yeah. Okay. And then once we've captured all those, climb back up again, and then repeat the process with the window open so that we get the window noise throughout that RPM range. Okay. Once you've done that, then climb up again for the stall, and then once you've done that, come back in, and then I'll join you for the go around low pass at the end, provided ops are happy for me to do so. So we got Steve strapped into the back. It was a bit of a challenge. Obviously, there's not a huge amount of room in the back of these aircraft, and there's fairly specific rules on what you can mount. So we decided to go for a handheld setup. There's actually 2 mics in that shotgun windshield, but that seemed to work well for us. And we'll cut over to some of the in-flight footage now. I think the first bit of footage we've got is from a stall, so you can see how that's all captured with Steve braving it in the back, his first time in a Super Cub. Speaking to Ops, White Wolf, and they were then kind enough to coordinate with James, who was flying, and drive me down to the threshold of runway 11, which is what we were using for low approach and go around, so we could capture the audio for that. And that's me just outside. So once Steve and James went through the all of the maneuvers which we wanted to record, we had a fairly strict schedule in terms of different RPM ranges, different settings to capture. They then came back in and landed, and then we were going to look at capturing some of the external noise of the aircraft as well. I let this clip drag on a bit because I think it's really interesting just to see, if you listen, I should stop talking, just how much noise there is when the aircraft's taxiing along, so many little bumps and rattles, and that's the kind of personality we really want to capture in Deadstick. So we then taxied the aircraft back, and then the objective then was to capture external audio. So we did it from 4 points around the aircraft, so we could get the different mix between the propeller noise, the slipstream, and the aircraft noise. You can see Steve braving it at the back, starting to appreciate the effects of prop wash and just how strong it is. It was a fairly cold day, and I'm not sure he appreciated being stood in the blast of the propeller there for all that long. And after we captured all the audio, it was then time to fly back. So we jumped back in the RV, fueled up, and then flew back to the strip. Zero Divide says, will this be forgiving for non-pilots? I think so. Well, one of the things that's been really reassuring is when we've taken it to some of the shows before, either to the flight sim convention certainly, but when we took it to EGX, a large proportion of the gamers there don't play flight sims, and we had quite a lot of interest from them, particularly from young kids. And the first few times they took off and tried to land, it wasn't pretty. They, you know, they crashed quite spectacularly, but it was amazing how, I think from the damage model, seeing how much they wrecked the planes, they weren't getting frustrated with it. They enjoyed seeing the destruction that they caused. And within a few attempts, they were able to land on the runway. You know, they couldn't put it down where they wanted, but, you know, they picked it up pretty quickly. And there we go, back at the strip. It was a busy day. We did a lot of recording. It was great to be able to fly over there. As I say, the flight over there was about 10 minutes as opposed to an hour-long drive. On the way back, I got to subject Steve to some steep turns and some G-force. I'm not entirely sure he appreciated it. But yeah, it was a really productive day. The video that you see there is just really small segments of what I was able to capture. Obviously, we spent a lot of our time with our heads down, actually going through trying to capture all the audio to make sure we could get the most out of it. So I'm just looking through the questions again now. Feel free to fire some questions at me before we jump on with the rest of the stream. So how do you separate all sorts of noises, alarms, and little sounds from each other? That's a great question. We've actually been down to Whitewater before. The last time we tried to go down there and fly, it was fogged in. We were unable to, but the fact that the fog was there was great because it meant there was very little external wind noise. There were no other aircraft flying, so we did a big pass on all the internal cockpit noises then. So we'd capture each sound individually. So take the throttle, for example, you'd be plunging it to its extents, doing it at different velocities, so you get light, medium, hard hits. And we're doing that for everything, you know, the control surfaces, getting the sounds of the ailerons. When you move the stick, the ailerons when they hit the stoppages. Same with the elevator. You know, we'd even be capturing the brake noises, getting on the wing, jiggling the wing so that we capture all the kind of creaking sounds of the aircraft. So we do all of those in isolation. And then we mix those back in afterwards. So anytime, you know, when we were taxiing along there and we're capturing it, that isn't the audio that we'd use in game. We use that for reference so that we can match it up with all the isolated sounds we've used. But we do use the in-game sounds when we're flying along. So what we did for that is we had James flying along at a fixed RPM, so 2,500 RPM, and then he drop it down by 200 RPM, drop it down by 200, capture all those, and then we can blend between them. Okay, let's see what other questions we've got in here. Will there be a tutorial to teach you how to navigate in-game? We haven't looked into tutorials yet. We obviously want to add tutorials, but it's something we need to tackle over the coming weeks. So that's something that we need to figure out. I think I said in the last stream that we want, you know, we'll never, if you bring the map up, it won't show you where you are as you're flying around. We think it's really important that players kind of get a feel for proper stick and rudder style navigating using Dead Reckoning. There are a few things that will help you along the way. The game, as I say, is based on it's fictional but heavily inspired by Alaska, but it's on an island. So if you ever get horribly lost, you can always find a coastline and use that to help you navigate. The other thing you can do is if you can land somewhere, whenever you're on the ground and you pull up the chart, it shows you where you are. So if you land somewhere, if you make a precautionary landing, you can pull up the map, see where you are, plan your route, and then jump back in the plane and fly. It's just when you're flying that you have to do it all properly. We do help you when you plan out your routes. You know, we'll calculate the wind drift and error for you. So you're not having to get out your little flight computer and do it all yourself. We help you with some of that stuff. But you're kind of expected to fly it properly. So we're going for realism, but we're trying to design the game in such a way that it is forgiving to newcomers. Same with the aircraft. We've talked about this before. Picking the car bit is forgiving enough that for newcomers, they can just pick it up, turn on a mags, firewall the throttle, and it will work. Will it have a campaign? The whole game is set. There's two modes. There's a free flight mode, and then there's a career mode. When you're in the career mode, you start off as a rookie bush pilot, and you get your commercial rating. So we have a concept of ratings in the game. Once you've got your rating, you can then start charging and doing jobs. So you'll be going around looking at notice boards, trying to find jobs, putting up adverts, hoping that people will see your ads and give you work. And then as you fly around, we've got a reputation system. So if you start, delivering jobs for people via notice boards at certain airports, and you do a great job, then those airports will take notice, and then people might contact you and ask you for work. Or if you visit other airfields and start, doing great landings there, if you pull off loads of greasers and buy fuel and stay there a lot, people will become aware of you. Your reputation there will build up, and then they'll start to give you jobs. So we've got this whole it's a very dynamic mission system that we've got, or job system, I shouldn't call it mission system, job system that's set up, and it's very much sculpted around you and where you fly. If you crash somewhere and ruin your reputation, you can try and fix it there, or you can go to the north and then just focus on having a good reputation up there and forgetting about the people that don't like you in the south of the island, or vice versa. So it's not like we have a set progression of jobs. It's very dynamic and very much based on how you fly and what you do. VHF, VOR, great question. We will talk about that a little bit later on, because one of the things I want to show off when we jump over to the gameplay is some of the avionics that we've been working on. So stand by for that one. Any other questions? Are you planning to use flight patterns at larger airports, any ATS or ATC? We don't have any kind of AI air traffic control in the game. I think I always find it breaks the immersion using that, because you either have to use text or you have to use robo voice. And it usually never quite works as well as you'd expect it to. And often if people were flying in these areas in Alaska, they'd be so remote that the pilots would just be on safety comm or unicom frequency, depending on where you are in the world, making blind calls and announcing to each other what they're doing. And that's very much the intent with multiplayer. So when you're in multiplayer, you can tune into the set frequencies for a specific airport, and then you can talk to each other, making blind calls and let each other know what they're doing. We may look at adding some ground-based stations that people can jump on if they want to kind of take the role of ATC, but that's definitely something that we're going to add in the future. The real question is, can we water ski? Not yet, but you will be able to. Water-assisted landings are definitely going to be a thing. I think they're in our next milestone, actually. I need to look at our milestone schedule, but they're certainly, we'll be adding them very shortly. How will we gather weather information? This is something we've been overhauling recently. We've not showed off any of the map screen yet, and it's partly because we're saving some of that stuff, but also because we've been tweaking a little bit to try and make the gameplay as satisfying as we can. One of the things we realized a couple of months ago is we've got this map screen. So when you're doing your jobs, you go into the map screen and you can see all the jobs that are available to you. You can see the weather, you can see the NOTAMs, and you can plan your route accordingly to that. So if you're playing a game, you'd essentially go to the map screen, find a job that you want to do, check the weather, go and pick up your cargo, fly from A to B. Assuming that you do it successfully, then you can go back to the map screen, check the weather, and so on, and continue doing jobs like that. And one of the things we realized is actually when real pilots are flying, you know, I've talked about this before, one of the challenges isn't just flying, it's about how you obtain information. So now we have huts at airports. Depending on the type of airport, they'll have a computer inside. You'll be able to go onto that and obtain a weather briefing and NOTAMs. So you interact with the computer, and then that'll update your map, and you'll get weather and NOTAMs. But until you go and obtain another briefing, the information that is on your map screen will be the last information you obtain, so it will get old, it will go stale, and it's up to you to fly around. Now, if you're at big airports and just flying between big airports, that's fine, because they're going to have the resources there for you to use computers. As you get to smaller airports, you know, they might only have a they might not have any briefing equipment there at all, so it's up to you to then fly to another airport. There's a few other mechanics we're working around with that stuff as well. I think there might actually be something in the build that I've got to show off some of that stuff as well. So weather is job based. No, the weather is complete. The weather and jobs are completely separate. So the way that we model weather is that we've got historic weather for Alaska for the last 10 years, and then we've built a statistical model of that. So we can't use real world weather because we're not based in the real world, so we can't inject it. So we've had to create our own dynamic weather system. And then when you pull up the map screen, you're looking at weather, and you're looking at jobs that are available, and it's up to you to decide whether you want to risk scud running to complete a job, or whether you postpone it and wait a few days. So it's up to you. But it's not scripted in any way. And again, we never kind of lock any of this stuff off. So you may look at a flight and find that it's should be conducted with an instrument rating, it's IFR. But rather than stop you doing that, we'll let you do it. And then, you know, if you damage the plane or you get caught, then that will affect your reputation. Can you please talk about the damage system? If you damage your plane, will it be expensive to repair? Will it take time to repair? Do you have to take your plane to a shop to fix? Thanks. I think we talked about this a little bit in the last stream, but I'm happy to talk about it again. So we've got a dynamic mesh deformation based damage system. So wherever you hit the plane, that's where you'll see the damage. We don't just swap it out for a damage model. Depending on the type of damage, if you've got what you will need to repair it, the amount that it costs is very much dependent on the amount of damage that you've done. There's kind of two different dimensions to damage as well. There's the exterior visual damage that you can cause. You know, if you have a hard landing and you rip off a tire for it, then you know, that's obvious external damage that you've caused. But there's also more subtle wear and tear that you can do. For example, if you start the engine and then you turn the mags and try and crank it again and engage the starter motor, so you're engaging the gears of the starter motor, then you're going to damage it, and then that's going to wear out more quickly. So we've tried to be fairly realistic with the way that things damage with the aircraft, and the cost will be very much dependent on the severity of the damage that's happened and how expensive the components are. If you do damage the aircraft out in the wild and there's no way of getting back, we've got a salvage mechanic. And again, that's also linked into the job system and where you are in the world. So if you crash in a really remote area, you're not near any airfields, it's going to cost you a lot of money to salvage the aircraft back. If you crash just off the end of the runway, then it's going to be much cheaper because it would be easier for them to do so in real life. Let's see what other questions we've got. So we've got some multiplayer questions. Can you have a server-wide dynamic weather that everyone uses? Mr. Zoops, it's a great question and it's a good suggestion. The plans for that at the moment, because of the way that the dynamic campaign works, players have always got the option to carry a tent around with them, and then if the weather's bad, they can sleep in their tent and use that to scrub time so they can scrub time to get to, you know, sleep for 6 hours and then wake up the next day and hopefully the weather's better, or if the weather's bad, they can continue to sleep until the weather's better, or if they want to brave it. So because each player, when they're connected, has the option to do that, we can't synchronize time in players' career modes, because otherwise, you know, people will be trying to skip forward time when other people are flying, and, you know, it just doesn't work. So in the career mode, we have the time and the weather completely separate. So you're very much sure you're inhabiting the same world. You can see one another, you can talk to each other over the radio. But in terms of what you're doing, what jobs you're doing, it's very much your own experience. Bjorn has asked, is there going to be a free flight mode, which ties in nicely to what I'm about to say. There is also a free flight mode, and we're going to hook that up with multiplayer so that we can have kind of a fixed time, fixed weather that you can set up for a party, and then you can all fly together in formation. You've got the same weather, you've got the same time of day, and then none of the players can skip it that way. Will there be instrument failures and accuracies? There will, absolutely. I'm just trying to think how many instrument failures we've got in there at the moment. We have the vacuum system, the engine-driven vacuum pump, all modelled, and the gyros can damage, the vacuum pump can damage, so you'll get those kind of instrument failures. The actual instrument dials themselves, we don't have any kind of failure built into those, and the lights don't fail. It's all stuff that will build up and add over time. I wondered if anyone was going to notice the shirt. Flying Cowboys shirt, yeah. Any chance to have gliders, pilots launch and recover them? I don't want to say no. Certainly once we're in early access, we're going to be looking at more aircraft, so certainly more bush planes, some of the bigger bush planes, which will allow you to carry more cargo and do more stuff together. Once we've done that, then we're going to look at other aircraft as well. I know there's been some interest in different types, whether it's gliders, particularly with the stuff we're doing with the weather and the terrain, or helicopters. There's some interest in that as well. Clownfeet says, any chance of a G1000 style glass cockpit upgrades, or is it all steam gauges? In the core game, it's all steam gauges. I'm really, I don't want to say against, but in a way I am against G1000 style cockpits, glass cockpits. I think it just makes it all a bit too easy. You know, if a pilot can start off in a supercarb and they've got a GPS or they've got a G1000, they've got the whole chart in front of them. They don't have to worry about doing navigation. Certainly in the future, we will we'll look at adding a GPS, and then once we look at adding more aircraft, we'll look at that. So when you start out, I don't want any of that stuff to be available, but as you build up skill or over time when we have more aircraft, then yes, certainly we'll look into that. Hopefully they'll have private servers with shared weather and time. Yeah, that's correct. That's exactly what we're going to do. Will there be a $100 hamburger career mission? There isn't, but there really should be, shouldn't there? Float planes in the future? Yes, definitely. Yeah, floats and skis are going to be a big part of it. Any other questions that I've missed, keep firing away. I'll try and answer as many as I can. In fact, whilst I'm doing that, I'm going to juggle the other computer and get the build set up. It's interesting. A few of the questions that people have asked tie in very nicely to some of the stuff that I want to show off in the development build. So let me get that loaded. Cricket Death says, after playing for a while, can you hire other pilots to work for you? You can't. It's something I think about occasionally. The thing I like about Deadstick, or my vision for Deadstick, is the fact it's very much about you as a bush pilot, and it's almost got this kind of survival element, but it's about you trying to keep the plane alive and earn a living as a bush pilot. And so it's very much kind of like a solitary thing. I like the idea that you can maybe collaborate with players online, but certainly if you have this... I mean, it depends what you're asking. Maybe you're talking about multiplayer, but certainly, you know, having AI pilots that just fly in the background doing jobs for you, it just feels a little bit disconnected. So that's never kind of appealed to me. I'd rather look at ways that we can look at collaboration through multiplayer rather than hiring other pilots that are making money for you. Maybe in the future, can you make your own liveries or logos for your aircraft? Absolutely. We're looking at adding Steam Workshop support, and the easiest thing for us to add, which we do want to add for early access, is the ability to completely customize your liveries and put logos on it. So that will be something you can do off the bat. And then over time, we want to expose some of the customization tools. One of the things we really paid a lot of attention to with Deadstick, it certainly needs a lot of work in terms of how we expose it, but we've really tried to make the way that aircraft work completely data-driven, so that we've got all these underlying modular systems that can be connected together, and then it's up to you how you piece them together to make aircraft. So theoretically, as I say, there's a lot of stuff we need to expose to make it work, but we're trying to design it in such a way that it will be mod friendly and people will be able to make their own aircraft as well through Steam Workshop. So, you know, I'd love to see some crazy contraptions that people can make in there and start flying around. Any chance for paper charts? What do you mean there? Do you mean physical paper charts that you can have on your desk while you're playing, or do you mean paper charts in the game that you can pull up on the map screen? Is it possible to run out of money and have a broken aircraft so you can't fly? You can run out of money. You can also take out bank loans, so you can use that to help, and you can kind of spiral into debt if that's what you want to do. There's also the option to take out insurance if you want to, which will help with some of your repairs. But depending on the types of jobs you do, will determine how likely the insurance is to be paid out. I think I mentioned before that we might have some slightly less legitimate jobs in there that you can do for lots of money that aren't necessarily legal, and if you do those, then you might find if you crash that that any insurance payouts are unlikely. So PDF charts that you can print out, it's not something we thought about. The map screen we're updating at the moment to feel more chart-like. It feels a little bit more it feels quite modern and quite gamey. So it feels more like a modern take, like a GPS take. If you use tools like say ForeFlight and Sky Demon, it's got that kind of feel to it, and we want to make it feel a little bit more physical and chart-like. So we will have something in game that looks more like a paper chart, in terms of like a sectional, I guess is the best way to describe it, in terms of the layout and the look and feel. And I don't want to say that we will or won't add paper charts that you can print out. I don't think it'd be a particularly hard thing to do. So I'd certainly look into it. Will you release a PDF printable map of an island which we can use to mark new places? Again, I think that ties into the last question. It's something I'll think about. To be honest, the reason I'm being vague about it is because it's not something that had crossed my mind before. I think one person actually emailed me and said, will we print out charts? It's not something I think I've thought about. You said, is it possible you can print it out to mark new places? That's an interesting point. I don't know if I've spoken about this before, but one of the other big mechanics in Deadstick is discovery. So when you start off on your chart, you've got all your known airfields that you're flying between, and then there'll be a number of I guess you could call them designated landing areas around the map that you don't know about. And as you're flying around, it's your job as a bush pilot to kind of find these great landing locations in the world. And if you do a low pass over them, if you fly over them, you'll unlock them, and then they'll be discovered, they'll be available on your map screen, and then they're new locations for jobs that are available for you, whether you're dropping off hunting goods, that kind of thing. So we'll have a number of kind of hidden landing strips around the world, and it's up to you to find them. And there's various other kind of discovery elements in there as well. So we're really trying to mix up what you do. The kind of the bread and butter of your flying is delivering items from A to B, but you may also find that you have to go out and take photographs of things, or you may have to go out and discover strips. So there's a real kind of mix up there. Is the map at launch going to be final, or will there be map expansions such as American Truck Simulator adding new states via DLC? The map isn't going to be final. It's going to be we're making the kind of intention for the core Alaska version was to have two islands next to each other, a southern and a northern island, which is what we refer to them as in development. So when the game launches initially into early access, we're going to have the southern island complete, and then whilst that's coming out, we'll then be working in parallel on the northern island, which is going to come out. So we're going to keep expanding the core Alaska scenery, and that's not DLC. That's just going to keep coming out free in additional updates. I think I mentioned before, at some point we will look at DLC, but when we do that, that's going to be brand new locations, places like Papua New Guinea or Australia, and then that will be a pack that comes along with new terrain and whole new aircraft. So we do want to add new locations as DLC, but the idea is that we'll keep adding to the core location as well on top of that. Other questions? I saw another question which was good, and I can't find it now. I can't remember what it was. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to switch over to the game, which is open here, and then I'll keep answering questions because I realise that you're just looking at me talking in some slideshows. So let's jump over here. So here we go. This is, as I said, we're going to give you a bit of a view behind the scenes, and what you'll notice here is, I think you'll all be familiar with this airport. This is an infinite checkered world, and essentially when I'm doing my development, a lot of the development I do is in this massive checkered universe. It's just very easy to add things in. It's very quick to build and very quick to test. So we've got our hangar here, and then we've got our plane, and there's a couple of features in here that you haven't seen before. One of the things I talked about previously was walkarounds, and now we've got this tow bar mechanic in. And, a few people have taxied into walls before and not been able to get out, so now we have a tow bar. You can get out, you can pull the plane around, and you can push it forwards if you like. But you'll be able to get the plane in and out of the hangar in the morning, in the evening, and you can do it all via the tow bar if you like, rather than having to taxi around. Did you answer questions about VOR DME? No, but we'll do that. We'll do that right now if you like. So let's just finish walking around the aircraft. So the other thing I think we've shown off before is how you can interact with all the items out here. When you're doing your walkarounds, we now have fully interactive control surfaces. So all these things you can grab hold of and check they all work, so that you can do your full and free checks when you're walking around the aircraft to make sure everything works as it should. You can also hand swing the propeller now, which wasn't a feature before, but we'll do that at the end. So we'll just quickly walk around here. Again, I think you've seen all this before, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much. Okay, let's jump inside the aircraft. We had a question about VOR and DME. Tow bar and slopes. Yeah, the tow bar is actually all simulated physically. So if you're trying to go uphill, you're going to find it hard. If you're going downhill, you might get run over. You won't get run over, but it'll be much easier to go down the hill. So yeah, it's all simulated physically, and the aircraft's going to react as it should do, depending on the type of slope that you're trying to pull it up. So inside the aircraft here, you'll notice a few new things. We've got the angle of attack indicator in here now, which fully works. That's one of the upgrades you can get. We've got the hula dial in here. Some of you have seen that before. And then in here, we've got some more instruments. So we've got our navcom, we've got a transponder, we've got an ADF and VOR DME. So let's have a quick look at these before we do anything else. If I turn on the master switch here, then we can come down and turn on radios. That's our Avionics master, and then we can turn on the radio here. And what we've done is we've spent a lot of time. These were hooked up visually before, but they didn't actually work under the hood. Now we've spent time hooking all these up. So you can set in your frequencies here, and just turn the volume up. I can actually test all these now and make sure they work. You know, I can try and ident the frequencies. Squawk 77, you'll see that's the default squawk in Deadstick for the moment. We should probably change that. All the volumes on here work, and all these work. And again, I think I've shown this before, but all the circuit breakers in here work. So I can pop the radio circuit breaker, and you'll see that the amp load as well changes. So all the underlying electrical systems are all being simulated. You can play with all this stuff, and it all works. You know, if you've got an alternator failure, then you'll want to shed electrical load, and you can do all that via the circuit breakers. If you've got any issues, you might need to use the circuit breakers to solve them. So we've got this here. I've shown you how you can test that the radio is working. We've also got it on the nav frequencies here, and you'll notice that actually the static that you get is the right kind of static depending on the type of frequencies that you're tuning into. I think I should have been more prepared. I think we've got one VOR in this test location, which is 113.0, and you can use proper Morse ident. So if anyone knows Morse code, tell me what the ident is for this VOR. No clue, me neither. I never learnt Morse code, so I always have to write down the Morse code whenever I'm trying to identify a VOR. I think 113.0 is based on Midhurst, which is in the south of England, which is one I actually use fairly often in real life. The other thing I should point out is that when you're tuning into these frequencies, the signal to noise ratio in terms of static and the signal you get from the receiver is completely dynamic. So this isn't just completely baked in. You've got some static and you've got your identifier. The quality of the signal you get will be determined based on how far away you are from the receiver. So we do all those kind of strength calculations as well in here. Right, we'll turn that one off now, and then we will turn on the DME. There's a slight bug in here at the moment. If it's at 0, it switches between that and 99, so ignore that. But you can either have it set where it's paired with the navcom, and then you'll get the distance to the DME there, or you can set the frequency separately. And this all works. You know, these are all simulated as accurately as I can. Again, we've got an identifier on here as well. And then under that, we've got the ADF. So we'll turn this on. We'll try and identify this, which I think is 300. And all the buttons on here again work correctly, ADF, RMT, except for the beat frequency oscillator. I have got no idea what that should do or how it works, and most people I speak to don't seem to know what it's for. So if anyone knows what the beat frequency oscillator should do, or when it's actually used, let me know, and I will add the functionality for it. So as well as that, we can switch between the flight time and elapsed time. You can actually use the timer on here. We can set it and reset it. So if you're flying legs, you can set that and use it as well. And we also have the option to set a separate frequency in here, and you can flip-flop it. So we can switch between different frequencies as well. Now, another thing that I thought would be really cool to hook into here is a lot of flyers, you know, when they're doing the bush flying or in the UK, they would actually tune the ADF into radio stations, and they could use those for navigation, but then also you'd be able to listen to the radio whilst you're flying along. So in here at the moment, if I set this to 1000 and switch frequency, you'll see that it tunes into internet radio stations. So as you're flying along, you'll be able to tune into internet radio stations and listen to them as you're flying.
This is the hour of need. Where's the policeman?
And we'll have it exposed. I'm not sure how we're going to do it yet. Either just a text file that you can set up, or we'll have it in a menu. We've not done it yet. But yeah, you'll be able to tune in your ADF to internet radio stations and listen to them as you're flying along. So I've had loads of fun doing this. It just it really adds to the flying. And again, the internet radio station that you're listening to, there'll be physical locations for antennas in the world. So the signal to noise will be dependent on where you are in the world. You need to make sure that, you know, if you fly too far away from it, you're going to lose the signal. But you can tune into other ones. But again, it's completely optional. You can turn all that off if you want to. You don't have to use it. So there we go. There's all of our radios. Oh, you can see the VOR that it's hooked up. To and from flags are working. We've got no glide slope, so this is just a VOR, and we can tune that in if we want to. The ADF, let's just try and hook that up quickly. There we go, that's all working as well. So everything in here is all simulated now, ready to go. Dark Scales, I'm so conflicted. Part of me wants you to keep developing cool touches like this, and part of me wants this is, as a developer, you know, Deadstick's my baby, and there's all these little things, you know, I've got 100 of these ideas that keep me awake at night, all these little things I want to add, and yeah, it's definitely getting to the point now where it's, you know, we have to make hard decisions and leave some of the other cool little features until after development. But the internet radio was one I just had to get in. I couldn't resist. So yeah, there's tons of other little things like that I'd love to do, but we're having to be fairly sensible now about what little features we add and wait until after early access. Otherwise, you know, you're going to be waiting 5 years until the game goes into early access, which I'm sure some of you aren't going to appreciate. Okay, I'm going to show you one other thing we've been working on, and this isn't finished yet. So it doesn't look, it's not final, but I thought it'd be interesting to see. So this is some of the technology I've been working on over the last couple of weeks, which is airframe icing, which is going to be a huge part of the game. You know, if you're flying around and you start scud running, you need to be aware of the freezing level. Inside, we've got our OAT. Oh, sorry, hit the mic. We've got our OAT probe in here, which will show you the correct temperature, and that's all being calculated dynamically based on the weather, which is updating. So there will be a freezing layer, and if you're flying in visible precipitation below the freezing layer, visible moisture in clouds, then you're going to start picking up icing. And rather than fly around and demonstrate all that stuff, I've hooked it up on buttons. As I say, this is in development, so it doesn't look final. We're going to work on the artwork a bit more, but it's features going in. So if I press F2, as I say, I'm just going to cause it to accumulate icing on the wing, and then you can have a look and see. So we've got some minor icing here. And then as I hold the button down, we're going to get more and more icing. So this is, you can think of this as kind of a mix between rime ice and clear ice. So it's mixed icing. And what you'll notice is that, actually the best place to show it, if I show you on the horn here. So if you look at this, all these surfaces, any surfaces that are in the wetted area of the aircraft can accumulate ice. And you'll see that it actually adheres to the surface and will build up over time. And so it's something you have to very much be aware of. We will come around here and have a look at the propeller, and again you can see on the end of the propeller there, it can accumulate. You can see how it actually kind of starts to stick out the end of the aircraft rather than just being a texture on the surface. It actually changes the shape, and this is all simulated as well, so it affects the weight of the aircraft. But the weight of icing isn't the main issue actually. The biggest effects that you have to worry about are the effects it has on the shape of the airfoil. You know, it can massively degrade the lift that's being produced, and then hugely increase the drag. So you see on these surfaces as well how it can accumulate, and on the wires there. In my opinion, Ice needs some randomizing. Yeah, completely. If you look at it, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I say it's in development. If you look at it, it's incredibly uniform at the moment, the way it works, the textures. If you look at Rime Ice and you look at this, it doesn't quite look right. So as I say, this is very much a work in progress. It's an idea of just, I want to give you guys an idea of what we're up to right now, as opposed to always just showing off finished things. So this is something that's a work in progress, and something that, as I say, it's going to be in for early access, and something you're going to have to very much be aware of when you're... Oh, this shouldn't be in here. Okay. So someone else was asking earlier about how you get weather information. I wasn't intending on showing this off at all because this isn't supposed to be in here. This is not final artwork. This is just placeholder artwork for the prototype. In here is a briefing room. So when you land at an airport, you can come into one of these briefing rooms, and then in here you'll have a computer. You can use that to obtain a briefing. That will obtain weather and NOTAMs. That will then update the map. You can then go to the map and use that to check the weather. We'll have jobs available on the notice board up here. And then here we've got a till. Whenever you land somewhere, you have to pay landing fees. And every airport knows whether you've turned up and landed, how many landings are due. So if you fly to an airport, it's up to you if you pay the landing fees or not. If you don't pay the landing fees for a number of days, then it's going to start to affect your reputation at that airport. So you need to be aware of what landing fees you owe. And again, if you want to fly somewhere and not pay your landing fees and then just disappear and never go back to that airfield, you can do that if you want to. But as I say, your reputation's going to take a hit. That doesn't exist in the bush. Are you talking about landing fees, Flatboy Sim? Because that's correct. And again, that is something that we simulate in here. So when you fly to the bigger airports, you'll have to pay landing fees. As you go down to some of the mid-sized airfields, there might be much less landing fees, and there'll be some briefing computers. And then when you get to the small ones, we'll have just a little notice board with an honesty tin on that you can put a landing fee in, or if you go to the very small ones, the little strips that are completely improvised, obviously you don't pay anything at all. So it's it very much depends on the airfield you're flying to, and again, we're trying to model real life as accurately as we can. So it's something to be aware of. As you're flying around, you have to pay for fuel, you have to pay for oil, you have to pay for your landing fees, you have to pay for maintenance and scheduled maintenance, and these are all the things that you're having to pay for whilst you're trying to forge a career as a bush pilot whilst doing all your jobs. So it's not just doing jobs to pay for upgrades. There's this kind of real life economy that you're having to use as well. Rookie 31st, good question. Can player buy, build, own airport airstrip? Not yet. We've had a lot of requests for this, and it was one of those things that was never an intention for me. I love the idea of having the aircraft in, having the customization of the aircraft. We then designed the hangar, which you've all seen before. It's in here in a very basic form, with all the items that are in there. And then, as soon as we've done that, as soon as we got the aircraft working, we were thinking, man, it'd be really cool if you can, buy a hangar and then completely customize it, change the layout, change the look, do all that stuff. It's something we'd love to do longer term. It never crossed my mind, and was therefore never factored into the development schedule for early access. So it's not something that's going to be there initially. But yeah, I think being able to do that and build it up will be really cool. There's another question we need to figure out there with multiplayer as well, which is how that stuff all ties in nicely. When if there's fixed locations that you can buy hangars and someone else buys a hangar in the same spot, how will that work? So there's a few things to figure out there, but we'll get there with it. Do you have to sleep? There is a fatigue model. Yes, you will have to sleep as well. If crashed or camping, will you get cold and freeze to death? We don't simulate death at all. So what we do is, if you crash so badly that you die, you go back to your hangar and then you have to salvage the aircraft. So the penalty is purely financial. You have to pull the aircraft back. You have to pay to get the aircraft back, and you need to repair it. And you can repair it from a complete wreck. If you have to, it's just going to cost you a lot of money. So it's infinitely repairable, even if you have to repair every single piece. And then we figure that way, we're never punishing the player too much. It's not like you die and then suddenly you have to completely start again from day zero and absolutely no money. I'm sure we'll get requests for that, some sort of like hardcore mode where if you die, that's it, you have to start again. Maybe we'll add it in the future, but it's not the intention at the moment. We're trying to find a nice balance between realism and fun, and we want to obviously incentivize people to come back and not kind of crush them as soon as they've lost their pride and joy and have to start all over again. Will maintenance items be physicalized? Have to grab some box with your starter before you can install it? No, it's not. It's not diegetic at the moment. It's all done through in the same manner that the upgrade system is. So it's all very kind of menu driven. You go through and each part highlights in the same manner that when you look at components here. I mean, when you see all these highlighted in green, it's because they're at 100% condition, but they'll wear down. And when you go into the maintenance menu, it's similar to the upgrade system, but it highlights each component. and shows you the damage, and then you can select from menu which component you want to repair it with. Will search and rescue be added at some point? So if you crash, you can send an SOS alerts go out to local airstrips. Again, I need to be careful that I'm not over-promising here. So this is like vision rather than a feature that we're necessarily going to add. Well, I'm sure we will. It's something I'd love to add after early access, but it's not like it's on any immediate roadmap. Is the idea that one of the items you can buy is a PLB, and then you can turn on your PLB, which is a personal locator beacon. If you crash, that will send off a signal to other players, and then other players will have missions that... So when I talk about missions before, the career mode, everyone has their own very separate play experience. But the PLBs or search and rescues could be a really nice way of bringing the players together. So someone can set off their PLB, it'll alert on the map, and then you can go and try and find them. And if you find them, then it will reward you for finding them, and then the player will have a much reduced salvage penalty because you found them. So the cost of salvage will be much less. So it's something I've definitely thought about, and I think it will be great. But it's going to be after early access when we have a chance to experiment and play around with some of that stuff. I'm trying to think if there's anything else new to show off to you guys in this build. Have we got any other questions? As I say, we've been working hard on the audio. That's the next thing to go in. Are there weird things that happen when in the air? Aliens or unidentified aircraft? No, not yet. Again, I'm trying to think what weird things we'd have. I don't think we'll necessarily ever have aliens or unidentified aircraft. We'd like to do bird strikes, and we've got some plans for bird strikes and interactions with animals. Ah, you're going to hand crank the propeller? Yes, I was. Okay, so let's jump inside. I'll just do some hand cranks with everything off. So the mags are off, master switches are off, and mixture. Let's pull the mixture out just to be on the safe side. So what you can do is grab hold of the propeller and then pull it, and you'll see that it will kick back, and all the physics on this is again simulated properly. So you can try and start it. Ignore the audio at the moment. As I say, we've just been out recording audio for all this stuff, so the audio in here at the moment is very placeholder. But you can, let's try and start it up. So stick the mags on both, put the master switch on, not that we need to. Actually, let's bring the throttle back a bit so we don't get run over. And this will probably start straight away, very easily at the moment. So it needs some tweaking, but the logic's all in there to be able to start it. So if you have a flat battery, you'll be able to, you know, one of the things to be aware of, as I say, there's a tent mechanic in here. You can, let me turn the engine off. There's a tent mechanic, so if you land out in the bush because the weather's bad, you can sleep, and then you can wake up the next day and fly somewhere else. You need to remember when you go in the tent to turn the master switch off in your aircraft, because if you leave the battery on, and then all the lights are on for 6 hours, then you're not going to be able to start the engine. But the good news is, if that happens, you know, you don't have to salvage the aircraft back just because you've got a flat battery. You can actually jump out, grab hold of the propeller and swing it, and then you can get back and charge the battery or replace it afterwards. Will the game just be mountains, forests, or will you have some flatter bits around like where I live? It depends specifically what you mean by that. We will definitely have flat areas. If you look at Alaska, there's a really interesting contrast of lots of flat areas and then very big mountains. So we've tried to replicate that. If you mean built-up areas, so flat areas with like large, highly populated areas and lots of infrastructure, then no. Excuse me. We've purposely made it quite a sparse location. It's quite a kind of a difficult location to inhabit. So it's all quite remote. Lots of little villages. Fishing villages, that kind of thing. So there is lots of flat areas, but yeah, there's not like huge cities or anything like that. Do you have plans for a special edition or a collector's edition? We don't. We're just focusing on getting the early access version done for now. How far along in the map? How far along is the map in the development phase? 0 to 100%. Really hard question. I think one of the things that we've had to spend a lot of time doing is working on the tech to be able to produce the landscapes. A lot of it is procedure generated. I think I talked about this last time. It's the idea that we can take real world locations, or real world features, I should say, so particular mountains that we can like. We can take them and turn them into essentially stamps, and then we can stamp those onto our landscape in a kind of mosaic. So we can make the terrain to be the shape we want. So we can sculpt it so that we've got nice passes, nice valleys, to make, you know, for an engaging experience that is challenging but fun to fly around, you know, and that you can master all these little passes and things. So we've got that working. What we then need to do is be able to populate that. We have to cover it in textures. We have to cover it in trees, in grass, with rocks. you know, with the sediment coming down the sides of the mountains. That all needs to be plausible. So we've actually built our own procedural tool set that will generate all that stuff. And then we've got libraries of grass, rocks, and trees that we can cover it in. So a lot of the tech has been done up front working on that. We're currently at the point where we're still refining exact layouts of, you know, how we want it to look. And it's very, it's lacking a lot of the items. Someone's just asked about houses and things. So all the work in terms of the models that go on the landscape, the houses, the buildings, places like quarries, lumber mills, little harbors and boats and diggers. We've got about 700 assets, I think, that are in development, almost done, that are then going to be populated onto the landscape. So the best way to think about it is we've got the natural world, which we build using our procedural tools, and that's essentially done. But now we need to go in and sculpt out all the little man-made elements and drop all those assets into it. Will there be Easter eggs like a solar eclipse? Not a solar eclipse. There is one plan for an Easter egg, but it's an Easter egg, so I can't say what that is. Can you give us an idea on how extreme the weather? Sorry, Fatboy Summer missed first. Are you looking for designers? We're a very, very small team, so we're not looking to grow the size of the team at all. Although there's definitely times recently where it feels like, you know, another 10 people would be very nice. I think I've said we're 4 people. But, you know, one of the things I will say about designers is we are very much looking to the community to be our designers once we go into early access. You know, this has been very much my baby, my idea of what I think Deadstick should be. Once we go out into early access, I'm sure there's going to be people out there that have got great ideas for things that we can do, and we'll be looking to incorporate those. You know, I think one of the beauties of the flight sim community is it is an incredibly talented and creative community. If you look at the add-ons that people are making for their aircraft, you know, it'd be great. It's a huge resource. It's a great resource for us to have. So yeah, we're really hoping that people will get engaged, get on the Discord. And, you know, we intend to do these streams as well once the game's released, so that you can all get involved regularly, give us feedback, and give us ideas that we can put in. So yeah, that's the best answer I can give for that. Sorry, I started answering another question and then got distracted by that one, and I can't remember what that question was. Why is there no VR at launch? VR is something we've supported from the start. It's actually it's an interesting one. VR, just getting VR working inside the aircraft is really easy for us. We've had that working since day 0, so that is there. I mean, there's some optimization required, certainly, before that's at the stage we put it out. The real challenge for us is all the other interactions that you do outside and making those work in a way that doesn't make you feel sick and isn't really clunky. You know, loading and unloading cargo. The upgrade and the repair systems are very menu-driven at the moment, which is not ideal for VR. So what we want to do is get the early access version out. We're trying to get a free flight mode in VR, so you can at least fly around and experience flying in the world in the aircraft in VR. But we want to then focus on VR properly so that we can get all those parts outside the aircraft where you're doing the walk around, loading the cargo, and all those things working, because that's the really hard stuff for us. It's not actually solving the problem of VR. It's not VR in the cockpit. It's all those other elements. Any updates on early access release date and price? We've been saying Q2 of this year for early access, and that's still very much the plan. So we're getting close. We haven't formally announced any plans for price yet. What I will say is that we do have an idea of a price in mind. I can't say what it is yet, and we're trying to price ourselves competitively for similarly featured indie games with a simulation twist. So we're not looking at, if you look at other flight simulators, you know, we're certainly not looking at that price wise. We're looking at some of the more smaller sim games. So again, I'm trying to be vague, but hopefully that gives you an idea of what kind of price point we're aiming for. Any other questions? Otherwise, I think we're going to wrap the stream up. Have you considered bundling with equipment for complete beginners? What do you mean there, Mikey? Do you mean like physical equipment like joysticks and things like that? Oh, the NPCs. No, there's no NPCs. Characters are doing good-looking characters, or I should say realistic-looking characters, is really, really resource-intensive. It's a really hard thing to do. It's something I've done on a number of games I've worked on in the past, and it's something, you know, it's hard to get characters that look good without spending lots and lots and lots of time and headache and money. So it's something we want to do. You know, I think it's going to be really important to have characters that you can transport around. I think, you know, there's other sims that do some elements of cargo transport, but they don't have people that you can transport around. Certainly with VR, having players with avatars where you can see their heads turning, you see their hands moving. We've done some experiments with that, and it adds so much to it. So yeah, absolutely we'll get there, but it's something that we've consciously avoided for now because we're really trying to push hard on the visual bar for Deadstick and making it look as good as possible with the small resources we've got. And the way that we did that is by making compromises and avoiding characters that are, they're very hard to do well. And if we're going to do it, we want to make sure that we do it well. Are you focused on mouse keyboard, or will there be support for joysticks? Sorry, I also missed the question about bundling. If it was talking about hardware, though, yeah, we can talk about input devices. Again, in terms of making the game accessible to people, we've really tried to make sure that the controls are as accessible as possible. Again, without dumbing down the experience, we've tried to be smart about how we map things. I don't have my gamepad plugged in, but we've devised what we think is a really nice control scheme that works on gamepad, where you have access to all the controls of the aircraft, either by looking at them and being context-based, or through the controls. One of the things that's really nice about the gamepad, I don't have it here, so I'm just going to have to gesture with my fingers, but we actually have the triggers set up as rudder pedals and then the bumpers as brakes. So in some ways, you actually get nicer, more intuitive differential braking than you do on a keyboard or with a joystick. But yeah, we use gamepad. We've got joystick, HOTAS setups that work, keyboard, mouse setups. And they're all, you have to bind them all, but they're all hot swappable. So, for example, I love walking around with the keyboard and mouse, or you can use the gamepad. And then when I jump inside, I'll switch over to either the joystick or gamepad. And I can do that at any time. I don't have to go through a menu and change controls. You set it up once and then it all just works. Will you hear part damage through the audio? Not yet. That's definitely on the list of audio items to add so that you do hear all the damage. A lot of the audio that we want to add isn't in there yet. So, for example, if I use a joystick to move controls to stops, or if I move the throttle, there's no noise there at all. And if you grab one of these throttles in a Super Cub and push it from one side to the other and listen to the noises that it makes, these aircraft have got so much character, and everything has got its own kind of creak and groan. And we really want to make sure that that all those elements are accurately represented. Oh. I've got some identifier going off. Turn that off. Let's just turn off the avionics. Are there fines or law enforcement repercussions for illicit cargo? There are fines, and it's not just illicit cargo. There are other ways that you can be fined as well if you're flying outside the privileges of your license. So yeah, it's something else you need to be aware of. And then the arbitrary, there are ways of getting around it. If you're flying flying missions you shouldn't be doing, you can be flying low to avoid them, flying into small strips, that kind of thing. So yeah. A bit of a texture glitch on the left-hand door. Yes, there is. So the texture there is Zed fighting with the background. One of many bugs that we need to fix before the game goes out into early access. Right, I think that's pretty much it. Okay, thanks to everyone that joined us on the stream today. Thanks for your patience with the audio issues. I'm glad that we managed to resolve them and show off the video. As I say, it was all very cobbled together, very last minute, but I'm glad that we were able to show some of that stuff off. Minimum recommended specs. The ones on the Steam page are our best guess for now. Once we've got the proper environment with the art assets in, the streaming's all working, and that's all hooked up, then we'll be able to refine them. We're hoping that we can keep it nice and scalable, because the beauty of a simulator is that a lot of the load we have is very much draw distance based, so we can have options where we can scale down the number of 3D trees so you don't see so many up front, and we can switch the billboards much closer. Same with grass draw distances and on all those things. So we're hoping that we can make it nice and scalable for you. You are going to need a reasonable computer. That's we're not going to be supporting the super low end, unfortunately, just because of the nature of what we're doing and the fact that we're doing so much in 3D. But we're going to try and make it as scalable as we can. That's for sure. One thing I will say on that front, actually, though, is if you've got a CPU with multiple cores, we are using all those cores. If you've got a graphics card with functionality, capability, things like tessellation, we are using all of those. So the sim is using all your hardware to its maximum capabilities, which I know is a concern. But people come from other sims, built on older architectures. It's harder for them to easily use all that stuff. But the advantage to us with using a modern game engine is that a lot of that stuff is much easier for us to do. I guess i7 will be good enough then. I'm not going to say. I mean, I'm sure you can make a good guess. I'm not going to say anything. I don't want to be held to anything in terms of specs. I'd be worried if it wasn't, but yeah, I don't want to kind of confirm or deny anything until we're happy, because I don't want to mislead anyone in terms of specs. Support for ultra-wide monitors. I've been looking at those ultra-wide monitors that have just come out recently. I can't remember who's making them, but they look very, very, very good. So we'll have to get one and test it and make sure that it all works. Same for multi-monitors. It's not something we've tested yet. There you go, triple monitor support. We're looking at adding track IR soon, and we'll look at triple monitor. I don't think triple monitor is going to be too hard because the engine theoretically supports it, but it's not something we've tried. So we just need to make sure it works, and then we'll get that out. Right, guys, thank you so much for the questions. Hope you all have a great weekend, what's left of it. And we're going to try and get another stream out very soon. As I say, the intention is that we do these streams every 2 weeks. Obviously, we're getting close to launch now. We're somewhat up against it in terms of making sure we get everything done, we get the early access done. So we'll do our best to get these streams out. And as I say, once we're in early access, the intention is that we keep doing these streams as well. It gives you a great opportunity to feed back to me what you think needs to go in. Once we're in early access, that'll be the point where we're really looking to you to give us your feedback, and we can really try and sculpt the experience around what you want and make it the best it can be. All right, thanks so much, guys. Take care, enjoy your weekend, and yeah, stay tuned on Facebook or other social media for updates on the next stream. If you're interested in getting more involved in the time in between streams, then I try and pop in on Discord. I'm usually on fairly regularly. Actually, in the last couple of weeks, I've barely been on at all. But if you want to chat more, come on Discord. I'm usually on there. You can chat to me on there. And yeah, if not, I will see you on the next stream. Take care.